Rajat Mona, Director General CDAC, Nichul Sandhu, Didhar Singh Ji, Secretary General FICCI, Virat, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, my friends in the media. I was really delighted to hear Fadi say what he did, Tony. I think that the world can get it right if the world realizes that the internet, not being in the physical space and in cyberspace, requires a new format of administration and cooperation. And therefore, the stakeholders involved in the internet are not governments alone. Governments are important stakeholders on the internet, but the internet is for ordinary people. The internet is for empowerment of the voiceless and sometimes the nameless. The internet is for those who do not get access to knowledge and services in the physical world. The internet is for those who are hungry for an opportunity to get access to information that millions and billions don't have access to. And therefore, you cannot approach the internet with the same view as you approach other processes in governance. And I think that's the message that, Fadi, you're sending to the rest of the world, and I entirely endorse that message. Everything in the world, in fact, the march of civilization is a march towards equity. If you really look at processes in the world, we're all looking to do justice to each one of us. Governments intend to do justice to their people. Within civil society, we yearn to do justice to each other. And so at the end of the day, unless a society is based on equity, that society will always be tumultuous. And that's the march of civilization. The internet is only a space. It's a space through which information moves from one part of the world within seconds to another part of the world. The important thing about that information is who has access to it, and what kind of access do people have. And unfortunately, just as there is a digital divide, there is a divide in cyberspace today. There is a divide between the developed world and the less developed world. There is a divide within India, and there is a divide outside India. There's a divide within India between those who are challenged and those who are not challenged. Those who are disabled and those who are not disabled. There's a divide between the rural and the urban. There's a divide between one region and another region. And that divide is on account of the fact that many parts of India do not have access to information. And our attempt is in fact to build that system of equity. Now, equity should not be confused with equality, because there is no perfect equality anywhere in the world, not even within nature. But what equity means is equality of opportunity. And therefore we must move towards a world of unequal opportunities to a world of equal opportunities. And as we do that and attempt to do that in the physical world, we can do it much better in the spatial world, because the spatial world has no territorial boundaries. It has no disciplines to meet. It is a free flow of information from one part of the world to the other. And therefore, we can actually, through the spatial world, empower 6 billion people in the world. And that should be the objective of the internet. And that is why when in Baku I said, let's move from the internet to the Equinet, because we must give equity to every stakeholder in the net. That's really the heart of the issue. Now, you talked about an intergovernmental group, and I believe that that's the wrong way to move forward. An intergovernmental group will meet the same fate as governmental groups in climate change, because nobody will come to terms with each other. Everybody will want a larger space within the internet world. Those who create intellectual property, those who have the servers in the world, those who are the generators of information will always have much more than those who are the recipients of information, just as in the physical world. The powerful will take over. So I do not believe that an intergovernmental group where governments alone decide the fate of ordinary citizens is the way forward for the internet and the governance of the internet. What we need, as Fadi said, is a consensual approach where all stakeholders are represented, including governments, because governments are very important stakeholders. And in fact, what Fadi mentioned just now, that there is a lack of public trust in the internet of late, because what has been happening on the internet has disturbed the tranquility of the world in many parts of the world. And that's not, in fact, I've said this several times. I said the internet has been a wonderful space where certain kinds of regimes have been, brought to book through information that flows on the internet. But the impact of the internet on democracies is yet to be seen. What internet will do to the democratic world is yet to be witnessed. What internet has done to the less democratic world has already been witnessed. Now, that is something that will evolve. It will evolve structurally in a positive fashion if the structure of the internet is representative of all stakeholders. If it is not representative of all stakeholders, then we will see an unequal world, even within cyberspace. Let me talk about India. What do we see here? Take the field of education. We see lots of institutions, educational institutions in India, where students do not have access to information, where the quality of knowledge that they absorbed while they go through their regular courses of study is qualitatively different from the quality of knowledge just because they don't have access to information. So within educational institutions, there are levels of inequality. What we need to do is to connect through a national knowledge network all our institutions, so there is free flow of syllabi, free flow of course material, free flow of information. Now it's for the student to decide what kind of information he needs for the objectives that he is studying in that particular institution for. That's how you bring equity into the system. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter which institution you are. If you have access to the same compendium of knowledge, then it is your internal ability to be able to use that knowledge for the objectives for which you are there. Now, as long as you can give that access to students, you bring equity into the system. The same with the rural and the urban. And this applies not just to education, it applies to healthcare, it applies to public services. And what we are trying to do in India is to create that platform within the country to be able to provide that equity to the people of India. Now, this is not an easy task, because you have to build systems, and there has to be moving away from the traditional idea of knowledge. The traditional idea of knowledge is that knowledge is personal to me. We must move away from that concept. Knowledge is not a personal affair. Knowledge is a universal affair. Knowledge must be spread like air and water. And then it's for those who are by the riverside and in mountains and in the plains to decide how to use that particular resource in the manner in which they want to use it. But knowledge is not a private domain of individuals and nations. And those who seek to do that do disservice to humanity. That, of course, does not mean that intellectual property should not be protected. It should be protected. But we need to find a balance between protection of intellectual property and the spread of a resource that empowers billions of people. That balance can only be provided if we have an integrated stakeholder structural system within ICANN, which is accepted by the rest of the world. And remember, those nations which have the markets are the ones that are affected the maximum. And that's why I congratulate Fadi and of course CDAC for having entered into this very unique agreement today, in which they are setting the first such domain name systems, research center, and signed an expression of intent. It shows that ICANN recognizes that India is a place where this market will grow, where by 2020 there will be 600 million people using the net, and by 2016 160 million using the net. And you can imagine, if actually they have free flow of information, you can imagine the strides through which people will empower themselves. In fact, one of the ways to deal with issues of corruption, which also brings inequality into the system, is to empower people through the net, so that they are aware of the public services that are being offered by the state, and they can actually access those public services in an equal fashion as any other. We bring transparency into the system by ensuring that auctions take place on the net. We bring transparency into the system by providing all the rules and regulations on the net, so those who participate are able to know what particular venture they are participating in, what are the terms and conditions. Nothing should happen within closed doors of government offices. It should all be in the open. And I am happy to tell you that my government is fully committed to make systems most transparent and accountable. That also is an aspect of equity, because unless systems are more accountable and transparent, you won't bring equity into the system. So, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Virat, for changing the format of speakers. I do appreciate for your having given me this opportunity. But one last word before I leave. India is fully committed to freedom of expression. And that commitment is quite evident from the fact that when I joined the Communications Ministry, there was only 60 million users on the net, and now there are 160. They are going to grow. And one last word, and that is that when I look at what happened with cyclone in Orissa, a thought came to my mind, and that is, if people did not have mobile phones, we would not have saved thousands of lives. It's because people had access to a mobile phone that we could reach information to thousands of people that there is a cyclone coming and you should save yourselves. That's the power of the net. We need to save lives. We need to create jobs. We need to take care of sick and poor people in the remotest parts of villages. We need to educate the voiceless. We need to educate the challenged. We need to empower the challenged. We need a net for 6.1 billion people. And there is no way we can empower 6.1 billion people unless each segment of civil society and all stakeholders are part of decision making on the internet. Thank you and all the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, the minister will be leaving now, but the ceremony will continue. May I request Mr. Didar Singh to please come and deliver his little welcome address.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for being with us, and we know that you had this important commitment and yet you came to be with us and inaugurate this function. Our gratitude from Vicky for that. As Secretary